Now, evidence. How are we doing on time? We're like just over an hour here? Yeah, okay. Evidence is the information that you use to support your claims, right? We've talked about it a little bit already. Evidence should be specific, right? Claims are general. Evidence should be specific. Specific examples of things. If you have sources, right? Specific maybe quotes or things that are mentioned in those sources. They should be effective, obviously. And they should be relevant to the claim that they're intending to support. Which seems like common sense, right? In order for your evidence to support a claim, it needs to be related to that claim. There's no specific amount of evidence that you need, right? We talked about how however many claims you have is however many body paragraphs you have. So, usually you want to come up with 3 claims. Evidence doesn't work like that, right? You don't need a certain amount or a certain number of pieces of evidence to support each claim. In this diagram earlier, we had 3. But that's just an example. You don't need 3. Just as much as you have that you can fit in within the time frame is good. What it boils down to is you want to have enough evidence to sufficiently support your claim. However much evidence you think you need to make your claim rock solid, to make your claim, well supported, that's how much you want to include. If you have 15 pieces of evidence, don't put all 15 in there. You don't need it all. Right? You just need enough to the point where you're like, all right, my claim is indisputable now. It's rock solid. It's strongly supported. I'm good to go. One important note, if your claim has multiple facets to it, which is rare, right? Most of the time your claim is going to be focused on one thing. But if it does have multiple components to it, you need to make sure all of those components are supported by evidence. And where does evidence come from? It depends on which essay you're working on. On the synthesis essay, all of your evidence is going to come from provided sources. You can maybe occasionally include something, from your head that's not in the sources, but 95% of your evidence should come from those sources. They're given to you. They're there for a reason. They want you to use them. Use them. For the rhetorical analysis essay, your evidence is going to come from the passage that's provided to you. Everything you need is going to be in there, right? And for your argument essay, it's from your own brain, from your own knowledge or experiences. You're not given any passage or sources to work with. You have to come up with it on your own. Let's do an activity here. We did an activity earlier with thesis statements, right? Which was the best thesis statement. Now let's try to identify which piece of evidence best supports the claim. So for each of these, we have a claim. We have 3 options. Let's see which one works the best here. So let's take a look at question 1. Our claim: college athletes make money for the schools that they play for. And you might be like, that's a weird claim. What does that mean? Presumably, if this was our claim, right, our thesis should be something like college athletes should be paid, right? And then one of our claims is the reason that they should be paid is that they make money for the schools that they play for. So that's kind of why this maybe doesn't make sense in a vacuum, but it would make sense if that was our thesis. So that's our claim. College athletes make money for the schools that they play for. Now we want evidence that supports that claim, right? We don't want evidence that supports our thesis. We want evidence that supports the claim that college athletes make money for the schools that they play for. Option A, people pay money to go to college football games. Option B, Ohio State University's athletics department claimed almost $234 million in revenue during the 2019-2020 school year, source D. And choice C, despite their popularity and skill, college athletes do not get paid. Gonna pause, read over these again if you need to. Once you have an idea, unpause, and I'll talk about it. So the best option here, the best evidence is B. If this was a synthesis essay, right, it's good because it uses the source. And the reason that this is the best evidence here is because it is a very specific example, right? That's what we want, specific, effective, and relevant. It's a very specific example of a college making money from their athletes, right? It's numbers, it's data that tells us that Ohio State University did make money from their athletes, from their athletics department, which reinforces our claim that these athletes make money for the schools that they play for. Let's talk about A for a second, though. People pay money to go to college football games. This would be okay evidence if this was a argument essay, right? People pay money to go to college football games is evidence that supports the idea that college athletes make money for the schools they play for. You might want to expand on it a little bit, right? You might want to say that, people pay large quantities of money to attend college sporting events or something like that, right? Or you could say colleges make money from people that pay to attend sporting events, something like that. But A would be okay if this was an argument essay. However, because B is an option here, B is obviously better than A. C is just not evidence. It's not related to the claim at all. Let's take a look at 2. Claim. Recycling is beneficial for marine life. That's our claim. A. Marine animals can die from ingesting plastic, but recycling plastic can prevent it from ending up in the ocean in the first place. B. If not recycled, plastic can take hundreds of years to decompose. C. Recycling can have numerous environmental and ecological benefits. You know the drill. Give it a pause, try to figure it out, and then unpause when you're ready. Okay. So A is the best evidence here. Our claim is that recycling is beneficial for marine life. A talks about how recycling can prevent plastic from ending up in the ocean. And the reason that is relevant is because marine animals can die from ingesting plastic, right? It is a specific way that recycling is beneficial for marine life. So that makes it strong evidence. B is not related, right? B might be evidence for a different claim, but not the claim about marine life. It doesn't relate to marine life at all. And C could be a thesis, honestly. Recycling can have numerous environmental and ecological benefits. That's a very broad statement. That could be your thesis statement here, but it's definitely not going to be your evidence. So A is correct here. Let's look at 3. Claim. The author's use of repetition in paragraph 3 emphasizes his anger towards the proposed policy. So this is presumably a rhetorical analysis essay, right? Because it's talking about the author's use of repetition in a particular part of a passage and what it does. A, by repeating the word insanity, the author emphasizes that he is angry, line 28 to 41. B, he is angry about the policy restricting the rights of certain groups of people. C, the author repeatedly uses the words insanity and insane to refer to both the policy itself and the people who proposed the policy, stating, quote, this proposal is, that's supposed to say born, not brawn. This proposal is born from insanity. It is the insane product of insane legislators, lines 28 to 30. What do you think? Which is the best evidence here? So the correct answer here is C. And C is the best because it supports all kind of components of this claim, right? It talks about the author's use of repetition, and it also talks about his anger. It gives specific examples of the way that the author uses repetition and how those uses of repetition emphasize his anger. It tells us what words are repeated. It gives us a direct quote here. And obviously, using words insanity and insane to refer to the policy and the people who proposed it emphasizes his anger. A, by repeating the word insanity, the author emphasizes that he is angry. Well, it is an example. However, it doesn't really tell us how. It pretty much just restates the claim, right? It restates the claim and tells us that the word that he's repeating is insanity, but it doesn't demonstrate how he expresses his anger. So that's why A is not very strong. And then B doesn't even address the part about repetition, right? It just says what he is angry about, but that's not what our claim is. Our claim isn't talking about what he's angry about or why he's angry. Our claim is specifically about the repetition, how the repetition emphasizes the anger. So C is our best evidence here. All right, practice time. Trying to come up with some evidence on our own. So again, we're back to that same prompt about Plato and Aristotle and ownership. And we wrote claims for this earlier. Now it's time to come up with evidence for these claims. So each of the claims that you wrote earlier, you should have written, I think, 3 of them. Or maybe 2 of them. Maybe I only asked you to write 2 of them. Nope, 3. For those claims, try to come up with 2 pieces of evidence for each. Evidence that is specific, effective, and relevant to the claim that it's intended to support. Give this a pause. Work on this. Unpause when you're done. Okay. So let's look at some examples here. If supporting the first claim above, so again, that first claim, knowledge that people learn throughout their lifetimes impact the way that they behave and the decisions that they make. One example of evidence could be people who learn to treat others with kindness from a young age will continue to apply that knowledge in their interactions with other people throughout their lives. It is a specific example. It's not, one specific example, right? But it is a specific way that that knowledge can impact the way that you behave, right? It's a specific way because it talks about treating others with kindness, right? So it's taking the umbrella and it's breaking it down to one smaller idea. And it reinforces the idea that it's relevant, right? And it's effective in reinforcing the idea that the knowledge impacts the way that people behave and the decisions that they make. If we're supporting the second claim being that the desire to own material objects leads to greed, which makes people act in immoral ways. We already talked about a bunch of examples of evidence earlier, right? About Boss Tweed and child labor and slavery and stuff like that. What example did I come up with here? One piece of evidence could be that people who commit robberies harm others in order to gain more material possessions. And then in parentheses here, this is a little note to myself that I wrote back when I thought this was going to be a live class. If students can give an example that they are aware of, that is even better, right? So instead of just saying that people who commit robberies harm others in order to gain more material possessions, that's very strong evidence, very strong evidence. If you could give a specific example of a robbery that you know of that was committed in order to gain more material possessions, or maybe some famous historical example, right? That would be even stronger evidence because it's even more specific. For example, back to that Boss Tweed example, right? That Boss Tweed evidence, that would be stronger evidence than just simply saying that it can lead to political corruption. Giving a specific example of political corruption is even better. Obviously, that's not possible in every single case, though, right? You don't have infinite knowledge in your brain of specific examples of things. But saying people who commit robberies harm others in order to gain more material possessions is really strong. Even stronger would be if you could give a specific example of that happening. So yeah, that is evidence. And that is pretty much all we are going to talk about in this first lesson. Now, there is something we kind of left hanging here that I'm going to touch on briefly. That is the idea of commentary. We talked about commentary here as one of this the third goal here of body paragraphs. And we also talked about commentary when we were going over the rubric, which I think was way back. I'm not going to scroll all the way back there. Commentary is an idea we're going to talk about in lesson 2. It's a very important idea. It is that final goal, that final component of body paragraphs. Just as kind of a sneak preview, I will let you know that commentary is kind of what links evidence to claims and what links claims to the thesis. But we'll talk more about that next time. So a recap. Your introduction should do 2 things. It should introduce the topic, and it should present the thesis. Those are the 2 goals and the only 2 goals of your introductory paragraph. Your thesis should be clear, direct, and present a defensible position. You want to take a clear position on whatever the prompt is asking you to. You don't want to say, well, it could be this, but it could also be that. It really depends who you ask. Clear position. My position is this. My position is that. And your entire essay is going to revolve around that thesis. The thesis is king, and everything else kind of supports the king, works for the king. Your body paragraphs should each make one claim and support that claim with evidence. That is the purpose of body paragraphs, as well as commentary, which we'll get to. One claim per body paragraph. Each claim is a reason why the thesis is correct, and then you support those claims with evidence that is specific, effective, and relevant to the claim. And conclusions should tie evidence and claims back to the thesis. Without introducing any new information, and without directly repeating yourself. I know I mentioned how conclusions would make more sense after we talked about claims and evidence a little bit. Just kind of to return to this a little bit, does this make more sense now, the way that we can kind of tie our claims back, right? Our thesis is that one main point. Our claims are those kind of like three main reasons why. So we just want to kind of reiterate and really kind of cement the idea that these claims are the reasons why the thesis is correct, right? We're kind of bringing it all back together. But that is pretty much it for lesson 1. You, hopefully, at the end of this lesson, the goal is that you should have a really solid foundation on what the structure of an essay specifically for this test should look like. Again, right, we are teaching to the test. This is not some, guide on all of your writing for the future. But for this test specifically, this is what your structure should be. Introduce the topic, thesis. 3 body paragraphs, each with one claim, each with evidence supporting the claim. Conclusion that ties everything together. That's your structure. Specifics will differ a little bit as we get into each different essay type, but that is our backbone. That is our foundation. I really wish I could ask if anyone had any questions before I go. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to answer them. At least I don't have any way to answer them live right now. But yeah, that is all I have for lesson 1. Hope this was helpful. Hope you guys understand all the concepts, and I will figuratively see you again for lesson 2.